All right, everybody, welcome to the Collateral Damage Podcast once again. Thank you for joining us today. Maureen, I believe today we have a special guest. We always have a special guest, but another special guest.
Another one.
Another one, right? Domenic Esposito. And I believe he is going to be here talking about the spoon, right? The big heroin spoon.
Yes. Such an interesting guy who I feel really fortunate to have gotten to know.
Mm,
The interesting thing, I think, is that it's not just addiction related art that he does. It's
right.
also, he does some beautiful sculptures. And I was actually invited to his house, and he had this gorgeous gate that he did welded. I don't know what the right way to say it
Yeah.
is, but
Created,
he's
designed.
he's yeah, he's just very, very talented. And he used this to draw attention to the whole opioid crisis because of what was going on in his own family.
Mm.
And with such a statement that that piece of art is, it's just
I mean, it's an
amazing.
impact. It
Yes.
has an impact. A shock campaign, you know. I mean, and we talked about this earlier today. Was throwing up, something so significant to start the conversation about a topic where just casual conversation won't do anymore. Like just standing out front and yelling about it doesn't have the same impact. You gotta shock people. You gotta get them talking about it. And I think
Right.
he
Right.
using his skill set, like you just said, of just coming up with sculptures and being artistic and stuff like that, and using that, right? Like we have our voice, we have our books, we have our services. He has his art, and to use that thing to create that conversation, I think was just amazing on his part.
And I personally think he's brought so much attention to this because all of these lawsuits, um, the protests. I
Hmm.
mean, if I think I said before, if mothers crying with pictures of their children that are no longer with us because of this opioid crisis,
Right.
if that doesn't affect you, and the spoon drew attention
Mm.
in ways that we hadn't been able to do before.
Hmm. Well, I think people become, they become accustomed to seeing almost expecting it. Not that a mother's loss or that
Hmm.
the crying statement of pain that family's gone through isn't tragic, but again, people get used to stuff like
Right.
that.
You
I
get
mean,
immune, numb.
yeah, right. I mean, you definitely get numb to it. I mean,
Right.
I don't even watch the news anymore just because it makes me feel so uncomfortable.
I know.
And it's the stuff that's on there is just terrible.
I know. It seems to be one thing after another, and it's just nothing good. So I agree. It's tough to watch.
I think I put the news on for maybe 5 minutes the other day, and I was just watching. I was just standing in the living room getting ready to go to the gym, and the news was on, and just them just telling me what was going to be on the news, not even watching it, but just telling me what was coming up in a few minutes made me uncomfortable. I just shut the TV off and left. I
No,
was
I
like, this
know.
is
I know.
devastating news, and I imagine if people are watching it all day long, they are getting numb. They are getting
Desensitized.
desensitized,
Absolutely.
exactly, to crying mothers and people who are losing their loved ones. So,
Right.
anything that's new or different, like what Dominic's done, is just really it's needed. It's very needed.
Well,
Well,
looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. All right. So, without further ado, here is our interview with Domenic Esposito.
Well, Dominic, I really appreciate you being here today. When we first started talking, I had contacted you because I saw the first produced spoon drop, and I was
That
along
one
with
had an
everybody else
impact.
very, yeah, really just excited that somebody was doing something so out of the box, because everybody was talking about, people talk about these things, and then I felt like it was slowly getting forgotten. And there were the lawsuits and stuff, but it was like something was missing, like some excitement about doing something about this was missing. And in my opinion, anyhow, it seemed to really, you switched gears, made people switch gears, and people got excited about the fact that we can do something about this. You draw a lot of attention to that particular issue. Why is it? What made you do that? What created this need to go create this giant 800-pound spoon and plop it in front of Purdue?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Maureen, and thanks, Mike. It's great being here. Yeah, I remember those phone calls. I remember actually the connection that you made with us, Maureen. I think it was literally like that next morning. I get this text, and then we actually connected on my drive back from Stamford, Connecticut. But yeah, what sort of drew me to this is really out of frustration at the end of the day. And it's a lot of it has to do with my brothers and my family's struggle with opioid addiction. My brother suffers from a substance abuse disorder. And it's been 12 years of kind of pain and heartache, a lot of it that a lot of people have gone through. I've sort of taken on this role of really trying to help them as a lot of siblings do, in this sort of sense of hopelessness, right? And so the spoon for me was really kind of a cry for help. It was like a cry, where's the government? And also like who's responsible for all this? And as the more and more you do the digging, you realize that it's really just a handful of people, and it really is a handful of corporations that created this epidemic 20 plus years ago. So the spoon was always meant to be kind of this guerrilla kind of art protest, right? And it's also, for me, I sort of describe it more as like this dark, ugly truth. Like it's this dark, macabre symbol of hopelessness, really. So it's really kind of pointing fingers at the corporations and the people responsible for it. It's this struggle that my family's been through. It's not too dissimilar to a lot of struggles that people have been through, going through an opioid addiction. And
I think that's the one thing you could have created that would just it hurt my heart to look at it, and it made such a point, because that when first they went missing, and then I started to find the burnt spoons, and when she no longer even had enough, she couldn't even hide it anymore. First I was like, where are all the spoons going? And then after that, it was the burnt spoons. So when you see that, it was just like, yes, it just sums it all up.
Yeah. And that's what I was going through in my head. The sort of the premise for even the concept of making this spoon, because people like, how do you come up with these ideas? And so it was funny, like this has been something, and I've sort of been in my head for the last, close to 3 years. Like I would speak to, friends about it. I'd be like, I want to make this huge 20-foot spoon. And they'd be like, you're crazy. And I would try to have a conversation on it. I'm like, no, let's bring it back. And so funny, like, I mean, I would, this was always my big, like, sort of idea. And I did a lot of art around this. But for most part, this was sort of it. And I finally got the courage to actually, to do it. And and you're right, Maureen. It's an ugly remembrance of what the struggles we've been through. But that's the point, right?
Well, it's real. It's real, exactly. Though. It's a shock campaign. It did a thing. And I mean, when you put that first spoon out? I mean, what was the reaction?
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, it was nuts. We had, first the police department was there. There's probably close to 12 police officers, but the media was there as well, right? I mean,
right.
We had the New York Times, Associated Press, Hartford Courant, and it just, I'm not sure, all the lawsuits were coming out at the same time, so it really ended up going pretty viral. I mean, we got millions of posts and shares on Facebook, and even to this day, they're still using some of the photos in the New York Times and any story that has to do with the opioid epidemic. So it's really become this symbol of the crisis and in the place that we find ourselves in right now.
Well, it's definitely something that people are sharing. I see it all over Facebook. I see it. You were just recently at the FDA, right?
That's right. That was our last action. It was really, you see it so much in the press that you think that we're out there all the time, but we've only really had three actions, right? So we've only kind of deployed it or dropped it 3 times. So
it's getting coverage though. I mean, it's getting coverage. It's getting shared. It's had, not just an impact on the locations that you're bringing it to, but I mean everybody's seeing it and feeling it, and it's, what I've noticed on our end at least is that it's starting to encourage the discussion. It's definitely it's rallied people. You've got advocates from all over that are showing up to help. I know that. That's
right. I mean, the other point of it, and this has been more some of the issue, and a lot of what I kind of talk about is really kind of reaching people outside of the community, Mike, because I think when you're in and you're battling and you're in struggles, you learn a lot about the epidemic, right? You learn about the therapy, the different types of treatment. You become like an expert in it, really quickly, because it's survival, right? And I think for us to make a bigger impact, it's trying to reach people outside of our community, and we tend to be a little insular in terms of discussions, right? So it really is trying to, and that's what the spoon does. It really creates this discussion point, right? So if you see it in a paper, you're like, what does a spoon have to do with a pharmaceutical company? Well, it has to do a lot.
Good point. Yeah, it's a good question.
So, and that's also our mission is really to kind of bring that out into the open, right? And I know it's sort of a little bit far away in terms of a stretch to think about it, but you think about the AIDS epidemic and the HIV crisis that we had in this country, kind of in the mid '80s, right? And they battled for 10 years before that community got heard, right? And you saw changes in legislation with the Ryan Act. And I feel like with the opioid epidemic, there's been a ton of community effort. So many people, so many great people I've met. But I think in terms of real impact and trying to get help and federal government and everything else involved that we really need, I think we're really at the beginning.
I think so too. Yeah. I agree.
Well, I mean, we have to normalize the conversation, like you just said. I mean, for something that's killing 70,000+ people a year, we have to normalize the conversation around it. Like you said, how do you reach the people who aren't normally involved in that conversation? I mean, like, I get it. I'm in this industry, so I meet families all day. To me, this is normal conversation, but to the rest of the country, it's not. And sometimes it does take a shock campaign, something to create that conversation. Like you said, what does a spoon have to do with pharmaceuticals? Well, it starts here and it ends here, and all the stuff that happens in between is the conversation that folks like yourself and all the other advocates that are out there starting that conversation can have. I mean, it's, if you get it on the news, if you get it in the paper, if you get it on Facebook, if it's in someone's feed and they're scrolling through and they see it and they can see the comments and they can see the amount of shares and they can see the the heartbreak, then maybe they'll have that conversation. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and that's I almost do it almost like I'll meet friends for coffee and I'll talk to them about what I'm doing and really kind of try to pull them into the community. And you'd be surprised. People just they know nothing about it, really. I mean, you sort of see the headlines and the lawsuits and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there really isn't a lot of education out there in terms of what's happening. And I think that's part of the messaging too. And I would also, people who are viewing this, I would encourage them to really kind of think about, if they know a lot about it, almost become like personal kind of education soldiers, right? You're out there really trying to educate people on what it is. I was, after the DC rally, sitting having a drink, and there's a couple that was next to us and next to me, and they're like, they introduced themselves, and I kind of talked a little bit about my art. And then when I started telling them about, the spoon and stuff that I had done, they knew nothing about the connection. They kind of knew that, just like everybody else does in this country, they kind of see the headline and really don't know a lot. And that's what I try to do, is if people that I meet that are outside of our community, I really try to bring them in terms of knowledge and education. And I think,
I think too, I know you've been doing some things with Nan Golden and drawing attention to where a lot of the philanthropy, the money that the Sacklers, who are the founders of Purdue Pharma, where they put their money to kind of, I don't know, wash their conscience clean.
Exactly.
But I know that you've been doing a lot to draw attention to that too. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's funny. I got a great question by a reporter a few weeks ago. And he asked me, he's like, do you think that the Sacklers use their philanthropy to wash their sins? I was like, no, because in their own mind, they're not sinning, right? So they would have to first agree that they're actually sinning, right? So they're not, right? So that's the arrogance that we're dealing with here. So
I think I heard recently them advocating for themselves openly.
Yes.
Even in spite of all this stuff. I mean, they don't believe it.
Yeah. So
the good thing is these campaigns against, these campaigns to draw attention to the fact that they're pouring money into medical schools, they're pouring money into these galleries, is starting to really make a difference. And we're seeing some of the galleries refusing money. which
That's
I'm
right.
really excited about that.
Yeah.
And that's
So-
been definitely due to you and Ann Golden and people drawing attention to those, to where the money's coming from.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny, like people, sometimes it's easy to be dismissive of activists, right? Because you're sitting in your, I can't call, people who are dismissive of them like armchair warriors, right? But, we're out there, we're raising our voice, and I think it's being heard. It really is. I mean, the activity that I was part of that protest at the Guggenheim, what was it now, over a month ago,
Yeah.
which was incredible. And within a week and a half, I mean, they decided.
Was that all the spiral stairs and everybody was kind of
Right.
I saw that.
That was an amazing action by Ann Golden and all the other. There was a lot of other groups there as well, and including myself. And then we did the Met. We did other protests together. It really does help, and we're really starting to see it with the museums. You have the National Portrait Gallery in the UK, the Tate. These are the most elite museums in the world, right? And for them,
you're getting them to rethink the names and these donations. I mean, you're actually getting them to reconsider whether or not they want to expose or keep the names up. I mean, some of them are even thinking about taking the names down, right?
Yeah, well, that's part of our mission. I mean, I'm not sure how much they're actually listening to me, but exactly, that is our mission. Really, that's our.
Well, they'll listen to the masses. They'll listen to
Exactly.
if enough people make noise about it. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be tied to it or connected to it. And I think it would be really hard for them to speak out about why they would keep it, considering everything that's happening. I mean, they'd have to have a really good reason to want to keep that name up.
And the reason why it's also important, Mike and Maureen, is although it may seem like these elitist kind of museums, and who cares if they give up the Sackler money, at the end of the day, what's happening is you're sort of dismantling, in some sense, you're dismantling the power and the web of influence that corporations like Purdue have had over the society, right? So you're shaming them, right? So if you're a politician or you're a senator who's in the past taken money from opioid producers, and you've seen your museum or your big museums start to walk away. We've seen also with the governor of Rhode Island give some of those donations that she had received from Sackler to charities. So you're starting to see that whole web of influence really dismantled, right? And it's going to mean that they have less political influence on people like the FDA, on all politicians. So it really does help. It's the beginning, but it really does help in terms of really shaming them and shaming people who are taking money from them,
Right.
not just museums. Right?
Because that's the stuff that really makes the difference. Because when you have billions and billions of dollars, it's not necessarily the money, unless all the money is gone, which would take a lot to have all their money gone. But it's the reputation and the good name that they, and their ability to influence. When that's taken away, I mean, I know that a lot of people are calling for them to be prosecuted criminally, and that would certainly make a difference. But I don't think as much as the money is needed, but at the end of the day, after it's received and it goes through all the channels, not that much goes to treatment anyhow. That's the sad part of it. And this is what's going to keep people in the future from not doing these things. If they're criminally prosecuted, if they're not able to get away with if their reputation is tarnished.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I see it as, almost setting the tone for the next generation of whoever thinks they're going to be the next Sackler family. You know what I mean? Like, yes, maybe this happened for a very long time and it was quiet and nobody picked up on it and nobody made noise about it. And in the shadows, you were able to, create this power, this web of influence nationwide. But that it's not possible now. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we can't take back what the Sacklers did, and there'll never be enough financial reparation for all the damage, the lives lost. But enough noise can be made through campaigns like this and people like you, to show the next generation of would-be Sacklers that that's not an option. That we as a country won't stand for it. That we won't allow it, and we won't allow you to hide behind politicians and corporations and museums and whatever else makes you think that this is normal and legit, because it's not.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's really, that's a great point, Mike. And we bring that up a lot. It's really this moral hazard, right? And so say these guys go to jail. I know, if you're a board member, one of these corporations, right? And historically, all you did was pay a fine. Who cares, right? I mean, you pay your fine, you still get paid. It's not your money anyways, right?
I feel like the fines get factored into your risk. It's worth the fine.
But the question is quite a bit different. If you're a board member and you okayed some drug that's actually now going to kill people, and you and the Sackler or someone else ended up in jail, that's a different question that you're going to ask yourself, right? If you're going to vote on this as a board member, right? If I've got the potential to go to jail, that's a big difference than just paying a fine, right? So I think that moral hazard, really, we kind of have to end it. And you're right. I mean, we're not going to save. We've lost a generation to this, right? We've lost an entire generation. I think it's really. Do we want to lose another generation, right?
Right.
So that's why we've got to really step up as a society to make sure things like this, corporate greed.
Well, we have to make it hard for them. I mean, we got to make it hard for them to, you can't. Again, as a society, we've allowed this to happen in the shadows, that nobody spoke about it, nobody said anything. I mean, these pills were around from when I was using. I mean, these things were everywhere. They were everywhere. You know what I mean? And regardless of how they got there, one of the things we used to talk about as, when I was struggling with my addiction, we would say, no matter where you get this pill, the people who made it got paid for it. Like, it doesn't matter if I got it from my doctor. It doesn't matter if I got it from my drug dealer or if I pulled it out of my grandmother's medicine cabinet. Every single pill consumed was paid for at the very least by the people who made it. They got paid for it.
I think it's important to say too that the charge is that they knowingly misrepresented the addictive nature of the drug, and that's what the criminal prosecution and what the charges are against that family. And now that there's been lots of evidence to come out that they knew what they were doing and did it anyhow, and that's the problem that people talk about the Sacklers and Purdue. It's because there's evidence that they knew what they were doing. And yes, not everybody started with the pill, but the flooding of the market with all of these pills, people became addicted. And then when that the pills became too expensive because they were starting to be found out and cut back, then they made a big empty hole where heroin and fentanyl filled in that need. And then we have that. This is where the opioid epidemic came from. So I think that people get confused sometimes. Well, it was these people, it was your choice to take a pill, or my child didn't get started with a pill. It's not about that. It's that they created this market for fentanyl and heroin by lying about the addictive nature of these pills. And that's what the charge is. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard because, we get, sometimes we get a lot of criticism, that we're concentrating on the wrong problem. But where we're really coming after is really kind of, Mike talked about this earlier, right? It was really this moral hazard of making sure that this situation doesn't happen again, right? And people are accountable for what happened, right?
Right.
And the fentanyl and everything else that came on after. That all started though with, like you said, Maureen, it all started with these prescription pills, right? And you think about, the statistic, that I know is that 250 million of these prescriptions were given in 2012 alone, right? That's enough for close to every person in the U.S. to have a 30-day supply, right?
Right. I think we take 85% of the pain medication. It goes through the United States. We're like 5% of the world's population. I know that those stats are wrong, but they're close.
Yeah, they're probably pretty close. But
yeah,
and
it's insane.
That's it. It is. It's insane, and I think. So that's really our mission. Our mission, within the Opioid Spoon Project, is to hold these people accountable for what they've done.
And so now, are you getting pushback? So when you show up at these locations, are you, I know when you're protesting or something like that, there might be an antagonist group, somebody who disagrees with you, or there might be lobbyists or representatives from the other side. Do you get pushback at these locations? Are they either the people who, from the facility or from the location? Is anybody pushing back, or are they're really open to receiving you there?
It's been mostly online, Mike. So because
so people hiding behind a keyboard and
yeah,
saying,
because our actions are basically, nobody really knows we're going to do the spoon drop that day, right? So it would be really difficult for them to get there. I think if there's something a little bit more public, they may come out.
It just surprises me. I mean, who would come out against this? Like who?
So
It's
there's a lot of groups. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's mostly that pain lobby, the people that are in chronic pain and use these drugs, and they may be using these drugs appropriately, and no one wants anybody to be in pain. I don't want anybody to be in pain. Right. I think they're misunderstanding the intent.
So nobody wants. Their position is that we're vilifying the medication that they use responsibly instead of focusing on the addiction, right? Is that what they're? I'm just trying to figure out what the other side would be saying.
That's exactly. That, and we've made it. So there's been new CDC guidelines since 2016.
Right.
There's this patient. Where you basically have to, every time there's a patient database, so people aren't shopping around to go to new doctors to get more and more medicine. That's all new.
Sure, should be harder to do.
So
yeah, exactly.
That should have been here in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And because
these aren't crazy laws. I mean, these are the types of changes that should be in effect to prevent abuse, right? I mean, that's not. Right. I can't see this as being unreasonable. I just couldn't fathom. I was trying to picture in my mind. I'm like, you show up to an event like this, and if it was publicized, if it was known that you were going to be there, it just in my mind, I couldn't imagine who the other group would be that's suggesting that this is the wrong conversation to have, or that we shouldn't be holding people accountable who are responsible for countless deaths. I just couldn't imagine who the other side would be, and I didn't think about the pain lobby, but I mean, they definitely they have a point from their perspective, right? I mean,
that's right.
It's gotten harder for them, and they're looking for someone to blame, and so they're probably blaming addicts for misusing their medication, or they're blaming you guys for making a lot of noise about it. But wow,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but no pushback from the facilities, though, right? They're welcoming you, and
mostly, yeah.
Except for the FDA. I'm sure they weren't super psyched about that.
I don't think they were too happy about that.
No,
good.
I don't think Purdue cared very much for you dropping the spoon in front of them.
Probably not. Yeah, but they need to. They need it. They need to be held accountable. So now you're taking this show on the road, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I'm really excited about what we're doing next, and it's called our. We're kind of playing around with the name, but in the end, it's the Honor the Signature Tour, really.
Okay.
And it's great. I'm going to be on the road personally for about 3 weeks, starting May 11th.
Nice.
And we're going to hit the entire East Coast, or at least try to hit a lot of the cities in the East Coast.
Okay.
And
awesome.
It'll be a way for parents or siblings or people who have lost loved ones to the epidemic. To sign the spoon. So
wow.
It's going to be
How can people find out where you're going to be?
So we started putting some of the sites up. So I would encourage people to go to our Facebook page, the Opioid Spoon Project. And we just populated it literally this morning. We just started the campaign Sunday, and the response has been
I can imagine
overwhelming. And people calling us from all over the place, wanting to get the spoon in their location.
That's great.
So we've got 3 venues that it starts off May 11th at the 5K, Remembering Your Angels by Team Sharing. That's in Marlborough, Mass. At 9 o'clock. It's basically a 5K run. And that'll be really kind of the kickoff of it. And then we've got Boston Bulldogs recovery happening May 19th.
I'll be at both of those events. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And then we're going to be down in Connecticut at the Tri-Circle block party they're doing awesome. May 18th. Going to try and do a lot of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. All these things will start to get finalized. We'll end up in Philadelphia June 7th. So that will hopefully be the end of it, at least this tour. And it's going to be incredible because it's sort of really something I sort of thought about because, we've gotten a lot of requests from people to bring the spoon here, bring the spoon there, and I thought maybe we could create a memorial out of it. And
I love it. That's awesome. That's beautiful. Really a beautiful thing. I'm looking forward to seeing the start of it. That's going to be really something special, I think. If you had to like take a look at this whole situation and think, what's the one thing you would hope that the whole Spoon Project, what's one thing you hope it would accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to sort of sit like 5 years from now, or even 3 years, it would be really to kind of bring national awareness to the situation, right? To what's going on, and with that meaning, real recovery centers, fix all the incarceration problems, real funding, really kind of tackle the epidemic as it is, really as a disease, rather than just sort of as a problem or an issue in our society, right? And I think that's the bigger issue. And I think for us, it's really to kind of raise empathy and awareness of what's going on in this country, right? And I think with that, we'll get hopefully legislative changes. I mean, we're seeing so much happening at the community level. I really think we need almost like a Marshall Plan, like something that's really like we've got a rollout of a huge national movement, and that would be, that's what I would want out of what we're trying to do.
Wow.
Well, Domenic, the first time I saw that spoon, I had to call you, and I had to get in touch with you to thank you. I did. I felt like I had to say thank you to you for doing this, and drawing attention in such a public, motivating way.
Yeah.
And I thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Domenic. And thanks for all the work that you guys are doing as well. It's amazing.
Well, it was very nice to have you on, and as you mentioned, I think getting everybody to support this in whichever way they can, and so it's the Opioid Spoon Project, right? That's what they'd want to be looking for on Facebook.
Yeah, on Facebook, and a website as well. But,
okay, great. I mean, it's definitely it's encouraging on my end. I work in a little office here in Beverly, and I work with the families that call me, so I have this very isolated perspective. I mean, I'm familiar with what's happening, but it's very refreshing to hear that there are people like you that are out advocating and doing and saying the things that people like me can't get to, or that the individuals who have struggled that are no longer with us can say. And so I applaud your effort, and I'm really grateful for what you do. So
thank you. Thanks.
Well, I'm looking forward to adding a few names to the spoon, and I will see you on May 5th, you said?
11th.
May 11th.
11th, the day before Mother's Day. That's right, out in Marlboro.
Yes.
So.
Very nice day to start that, boy.
Yeah.
Man, that was a great interview with Domenic. He, like we were talking about before the podcast, his shot campaign and his passion and his heart. I mean, he's making a new sculpture every time. Like he's killing it. This is great.
Right. Just really determined to do this.
He is. I mean, the Opioid Spoon Project, he's got this, the Honor Signature Tour that starts on May 11th.
Right.
And where is this?
It's a 5K in Marlboro that is to benefit Team Sharing. And Team Sharing is an organization that helps families after they've lost somebody. So it's a support group for people who have lost somebody due to overdose. So
they're going to do a 5. So the actual location that they're starting this tour, and this tour goes from it looks like New Hampshire all the way down to New York, and this starts in Marlboro.
Yes, 67 Fitchburg Street in Marlboro. So early on May 11th.
So maybe it starts in Massachusetts.
Right. It's a short
I'm looking at the map.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, the map looks like it goes all the way up in New Hampshire, but we're going to go ahead and say it starts at 67 Fitchburg Street, Marlboro, Mass, on May 11th, and it goes through till June 6th and goes all the way down into what looks like New York. But again, I'll let you look at that. Opioid Spoon Project is the Facebook page, and let's see. Okay, so tickets are available at RaceWire, second annual Remembering Our Angels 5K.
Yeah, that's for the 5K.
So if you want to do the 5K, it starts at 9 a.m., and it looks like you can get tickets right there, or at least sign up right there on their Facebook page, which is pretty cool.
I'll be there, signing books.
You will. Fantastic.
I will.
Nice.
I will.
And the opioidspoonproject.com also has additional information. So your book, If You Love Me, A Mother's Journey Through a Daughter's Opioid Addiction, right?
That's right.
Yes. So now you're going to be bringing copies with you?
Actually, Barnes and Noble is
very
going
nice.
to be there, and I'll be
Okay.
signing, and Ryan Hampton will be there signing his book.
Great.
So there'll be a whole bunch of people there.
That's fantastic. Well, if you're interested, those are both great books. I like your book especially, but those are both great books. And I think that, all the information that people can get, different perspectives, right? So your perspective is from the mother's side of watching her daughter go through this, and
Definitely.
just how
Yeah,
heartbreaking it is to, it's right in the title. If you loved me, if you could just stop this thing, please. And, how far you go as a parent trying to get her to change her way.
right. So, yeah, it's definitely from my perspective. It's from the family's perspective. It's interesting because it's the same story over and over again. Everybody I talk to, I have all these people that come to me and tell me, "You told my story." Like, that's because it's kind of everybody's story.
My mother just finished your book. That's what she said. She said it was about a girl.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Because we all think we're unique, and we all think we all isolate and think that nobody could possibly be going through this nightmare, and it couldn't possibly be that bad for anybody else. And then we find out that we all have very, very similar stories.
Of course.
I think it's like addiction, wouldn't you say? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt like I was the only one going through what I was going through until I started talking with people and realized that just wasn't true.
right.
And, I guess I wrote my book to try to get through to the people who had my experience so they didn't feel alone. You wrote
What's the name of your book again?
Loving Lions.
Ah,
Thank you for drawing that out of me.
you're very welcome.
I wrote my book to make sure that people who were going through what I was going through didn't feel alone. And I know that you wrote your book for the
Right.
same. And most of the people out there right now, there's a lot of authors out there right now who are doing a great job of bringing this story to light and all the different perspectives that are available. And so, I encourage anybody that's going to come out and join Dominic's tour or participate in the 5K to
Right.
show up and get a copy and get it autographed. Because isn't it worth like somewhere between the cost of the book and like $1 million after
Just
you sign
about,
it?
yeah.
Somewhere in the
Oh,
middle.
yeah, no
And
problem.
so you definitely want to get it now while they're still affordable. And
And I would love, even if you've already read the book, if you don't
Yes.
want to read the book, if you're
Yeah.
at the 5K, please come up and say hello to me.
right, absolutely.
I love this whole idea of what he's doing, just because it just brings attention, and hopefully will bring a little bit of enlightenment to people that didn't understand before. So.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, we all do this. We all use our talents and our skills to try to raise awareness, to try to bring the conversation to the table. Again, you and I are using our voice. He uses his art. And I'm really glad that he was able to join us. It was a very nice interview. It was insightful. I got to see into his little workshop there.
Yeah.
It's not even that little. It's actually very nice. It's a very
No,
nice
it's nice.
workshop.
Yeah.
And, I've seen a couple videos on Facebook where he shows kind of behind the scenes of what he's doing, creating these sculptures. And what goes into it exactly, and then he's really
Yeah.
driven by his own personal experience and what he had to go through as a family member of, and it's very nice that he was able to come on and share that with us today. And his story, it meant a lot to me to hear that story. And like I say, every time we have someone on, I really enjoy learning from our guests, which I was
Yeah.
able to do today.
I agree.
All right, I'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us today on this episode of Collateral Damage. As always, if you'd like to find out all the different ways that you can listen to our podcast, you can visit our website, which is www.cdpodcast.com. There are many different ways to listen and subscribe, and we encourage you to choose the one that's most appropriate for you. And as always, I would encourage our listeners to get informed.
Stay connected.
Thank you for joining us.